All right.
Another boring.
Easy, easy. Stand by.
By the
Well,
way,
welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast as we take a look at the week ahead and the long range, which takes us through Thanksgiving week. In the meantime, it was cold today. We'll talk about that and a few other things. So stick around. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Sunday, the 12th of November, is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. Makes a great Christmas gift for someone who is science minded and weather minded. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Tempest is an affiliate of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And use the coupon code I want a weather station so you can save some extra money. Right, Joe?
yes, you can, in fact, save 10% off if you purchased anything from the Tempest people. And that's a pretty good deal, especially as we're getting close to Christmas.
It is. And a crisp, business-like good evening to you.
And good evening to you, and good evening, everybody out there. Turned out to be, as you said, Joe, a cold day with lots of bright sunshine. Didn't quite get as cold this morning as I figured we might. We only got down here in Putnam Valley to 32, but at this moment that I speak to you, we're at 34, and I do believe that we're on our way toward temperatures somewhere in the upper and middle 20s, the coldest night we have seen yet so far this fall season. And some areas up to the north and west of where I am, especially in the higher terrain or valley sections north of Interstate 84, I think it get all the way down to as low as 23 or 22 come daybreak tomorrow morning.
You have to get under 22 to beat me because my low so far is 21.2 uh, back a couple of weeks ago. We had rain here. Oh my God, Joe! We had 39 hundredths of an inch of rain spread over 2 days,
Wow.
and the ground is so dry that it just literally absorbed it. I mean, it came down. It even while it was raining, the ground was having a tough time soaking in the moisture, but it was better than nothing. I mean, I'm hoping that we get some more. Uh, Looks like we're going to be in cruise control for much of this week, but uh, we got a cold front coming on Friday, and that looks like it might be a decent rain producer as it goes through. Next week is very interesting to me. There's a lot going on. Uh, there's a lot going on when models have a really difficult time zeroing in on how it plays out, and when you have models all doing different things, uh, shows you that the atmosphere is dealing with a lot of power and just can't seem to figure out how to distribute it.
Yeah, and in fact, a few days ago, several days ago, on my Facebook page, I had posted the NOAA Climate Prediction Center outlook, 6 to 10, or maybe it was the 8 to 14 day outlook, suggesting, and I suggested that if you take that at face value, we might be looking at a relatively mild or balmy Thanksgiving Day, a Turkey Day. But from what I was able to see, Joe, I think now, talk about a cold front on Friday. We got another one, I think, coming out the middle of next week. Not this week, but the following week. Maybe Getaway Wednesday, the 22nd. And if that sweeps on through, well, it looks like we could find ourselves on Thanksgiving Day locally here in the tri state area with a blustery wind, clouds mixing with sun, maybe even a flurry or two here and there, and temperatures which may be hard pressed to make it out of the 30s. So it may turn out to be a cold and brisk Turkey Day here in the tri state area if that works out. But again, that's about 10 days away, and a lot can happen, and a lot can change over a 10-day time frame.
Yeah, and there's a lot of differences in the models in terms of how that all plays out anyway. So I don't know that we're close to figuring out exactly what's going to happen when. I mean, you go back, what, 2 days ago, I think it was Friday, where the GFS in particular, I was looking at it and thought, oh boy, if this verifies, they're going to have to cancel the Thanksgiving Day parade because it had what was it, like a 75 low, a 975 low, moving up into southern New England, and a gradient. Gradient so tight it'd be gusting to 50 and 60 miles an hour all day long. That lasted for about 2 runs, and then it just sort of changed and went to something else, and then it changed again where it had nothing at all. Uh, and now it's sort of kind of coming back to something happening that happened this morning and carried through during the day. I think there's a lot here that's happening in the upper atmosphere that is is really, I guess maybe the best way to describe it is that the models are just very confused to how to handle all this energy that's flying around, particularly out in the Pacific. And that's probably ultimately going to be the key to all of this, is how the Pacific behaves in the next week to 10 days. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight on this Sunday night. You could watch the Giants game, but if it's not over already, I mean, it was a disaster when I turned it off, so I assume it's an even bigger disaster now. But you can watch this show and just feel a whole lot better, and we're glad you're here. Hope you had a great weekend. Those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. Those of you who are lurking in the background, welcome. Subscribe to my YouTube channel because this way you won't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is on Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35. We're on Fridays and Saturdays when there are storms around, and we'll let you know ahead of time when that is going to be the case. And, of course, if for some reason you can't watch us, you can always listen to us on Spotify. You can even watch us on Spotify. We're also on YouTube Music and Amazon Music. So we're out there. It's hard not to avoid us, Joe. It's hard to avoid us, Joe.
Yeah, I said to Renata while we were eating, I had not watched the game, but I did say something to the effect like, well, when they played Dallas for the start of the season, they lost 40-0 at the Meadowlands. And then I walked over to the TV and turned it on, and I said, well, it couldn't be as bad as that, could it? And when the TV came on, it was 49-7. I said, I don't believe this. And
I think 42-7. Said Chuck Cardillo says the Giants lost 42-17.
42-17. I thought they had 49. The Dallas. But
well, maybe it felt like 49.
Does it really matter?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. All right, why don't we?
The Jets are taking the field, and God only knows what's going to happen with them. So
yeah. All right, let's get to it here on this Sunday night as we start off. We usually do with the satellite loop, unless there's a reason why we should start off with something else. And one thing I've noticed in the last, at least the last week to 10 days, there's been this persistent subtropical jet. You can see the clouds that are coming out of the Pacific across Mexico into Texas, and then across the lower Gulf states, and then out east into the open waters of the Atlantic. This was not something we saw last year.
Well, as we've been saying for many, many days, many weeks, the script is totally different as we lean into the beginning of the new winter season as opposed to last year. So one can only suspect that, in a snow-starved winter for the tri-state area, that maybe, just maybe this year, we might see something a little bit different.
We're getting corrections on the Giants score, by the way. You were right. John Melander says 49-17. Don Colgan said 49-7. So it's somewhere in there. It was a decimation, no matter what.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter is right. The chairman, Scott Briller, matters in a big way, and he has hit the tip jar tonight. Thank you, Scott. He says the longest series in the history of Briller Jeopardy starts this week. Okay, I guess that's the hint. The longest series in the history of Briller Jeopardy starts this week. All right.
Longest series? I don't know. Well,
right. Well, anyhow, just looking at this loop, you got the subtropical jet. You've got moisture streaming in off the Pacific into the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to gradually work its way down through California. Much of the plains, the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast in good shape today, and as you said, it's on the cold side tonight. But we're gonna bounce as we go through this week. I mean, we're not gonna fly higher, but we are going to see temperatures moderate in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, particularly Wednesday into Friday, ahead of that next cold front.
Yes, yes. In fact, normal temperature now in the lower Hudson Valley, give or take a degree or two, normal high temperature is 51. And I'm thinking, Joe, that Thursday we should get up to about 59, and Friday we should get up to about 61. So if you have anything to do out of doors, such as yours truly planning again to use the tractor mower and mulch all those blankety blank leaves that have fallen in recent days, looks like Thursday and Friday is going to be the day with those milder temperatures. And then, as you pointed out at the start of the show, we've got a cold front coming our way for next weekend. We may finally get a little wet weather here with the front Friday night late or early Saturday, and then we'll dry out and cool down again for next weekend.
I know a few of you are saying it's a little the show's a little glitchy tonight. I don't know why. I mean, I'm at full power here, and
And
I'm
I got
not
the whirling circle of
right.
death.
Some people have the circle of death, going on. I apologize for that. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm getting good signals here, so maybe it's somewhere between me and wherever this is going that there's an issue. Hopefully, it will settle out shortly. Radars tonight are, well, obviously it's not doing much of anything in the Northeast. In fact, the whole East Coast, Joe, is hardly anything from Maine down to Florida. There are a couple of showers off the Florida East Coast. There's a couple of flurries up in upstate New York, and that's about it. We do have another batch of rain developing across Texas, in South Texas and into southeast Texas, and that is sort of trying to curl its way up into southern Louisiana. This might be a decent rain producer for southern Louisiana because we know that we've been talking about the severe drought that's been going on there. And as we head up into the northern Great Lakes, there is some precipitation there in northern Michigan and on the upper peninsula of Michigan. Probably it's rain. And in the Pacific Northwest, we've got a batch of heavy rain that is coming into northwest Oregon, into Washington State, but the rest of the West is in pretty good shape. WPC. So now this would be for the end of this week with this cold front. Now has half to 3/4 inch rainfall amounts from Virginia, eastern Virginia, northeastward, up into Maine. Uh, it's kind of patchy in upstate New York and also in Pennsylvania. It goes back to 1/4 of an inch, and then it jumps up to 1/2 inch as you go west. A bit of a 3/4 inch area showing in West Virginia. Then it lessens again as you head into the very dry areas of North and South Carolina and North Georgia, 1/4 of an inch or less. And then it picks up again in the Florida Panhandle, southern Alabama, Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, and then back over to the Texas coast, 1.5 inches to some places as much as 3 or 4 or even 5 inches in that orangey area that you see, and also the east coast of Florida, a few inches of rain, and the west we've got 1/2 inch to 1 inch amounts up and down the west coast from Washington all the way down south with a few purple patches of 1.5 inches. And then there's some big heavy rain that's indicated off the coast of California. So assume that, I guess WPC is assuming that the several inch plus rainfalls that are being indicated offshore stay offshore, but wouldn't take much to push that a little bit further inland. We don't have much snow going on over the next 3 days. This is a probability of at least 2, and I've got it on the wide U.S. view because I think it's more important to show that most of the nation is not going to see much of anything. In the Northeast, you've got 2 small patches in the Adirondacks and in the northern mountains of Vermont and New Hampshire, where there is all of a whopping 10 to 20% chance that there could be at least 2 inches. There's a bubble of higher probability on the Canada side, and also in the northernmost Rockies inside the U.S., where we have slightly higher probabilities of at least 2 inches, but heavier amounts as you get onto the Canada side. So, uh, not really much in the way of snowfall. And when we look at the long range from WPC for the probability of, let's call it at least 3 or about 3, it's really confined to the northern Rockies Wednesday into Thursday. Friday, nothing really. There's like a little patch there in the Sierra Nevadas in California. Saturday, again, not very much, except again the Sierra Nevadas in California. And then as we go to Saturday into Sunday, it picks up a little bit in the Northwest. And also in the Colorado Rockies, there's some low probabilities of 10 to 30% uh, for um, for at least 2.5 to 3 inches. So uh,
I think we're going to have to wait a little while for any kind of a real threat of snow or accumulating snow here. Of course, we may have to wait until December,
right.
and that's good news because then the municipalities will start digging into their little uh, salt and shoveling till because they really don't account for that in November.
Yeah, yeah. Folks got to remember where we are in the calendar. Also, it's the 12th of November. I mean, just to talk about the areas that we generally cover. Um, the average high this time of year is middle 50s. Am I correct?
Well, for the Hudson Valley, it's 51,
All right.
give or take a degree
Let's
or two.
say let's say low to mid 50s. So if you think about it, you need a pattern that's got to get you uh, so the average for the average high, the lows are down in the low 40s or upper 30s. So the means are the average mean temperature is what about in the upper 40s, maybe middle to upper 40s.
The average mean temperature,
Yeah, for this time of year.
um, 15, the average mean would be about 43, 44.
All right, so you need enough going on in the atmosphere where if you want it to snow this time of year, you got to get temperatures to be at least 10 to 15 degrees below normal. And that's not easy to do. I mean, you really need a deep trough set up someplace. You need to have some straight flow from Canada, and it's just not the type of pattern that sets up often during the first part. Every once in a while you'll get it, but you got to when you're talking about the average high being up between 51 and 55, and if it's snowing, you got to figure the average high is going to be somewhere in the low 30s. Do the math. It's got to be 24 degrees lower than that. So, um, you 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 have to wait till we get to the. I think by the time you get toward the Thanksgiving week and you go beyond that, that's when you start to get certainly across the northern tier of states, where your average temperatures are low enough where you could probably, pull off a couple, some snow, if you have the right setup. But anywhere else, it's really one of the we're still in that place where if it happens this time of year, it's kind of on the freakish side.
And just as a point of reference, I said tonight low temperatures across the lower Hudson Valley in the 22 to 31 range. 22 would be for those places, again, north of 84 in some valley sections that are really out of the way, really rural spots. And 31 would be for urban and coastal localities. And if you're wondering when it was the last time we had temperatures as cold as this, you're probably thinking, oh, well, maybe February or March. No, actually, on April 3rd, earlier this year, on April the 3rd, we had temperatures that were pretty close to what we're looking at for overnight tonight and early tomorrow morning. So, and that was unusually cold for the month of April. So it's been about a little over 7 months since we've been as cold as what we're looking at for late tonight and tomorrow morning. And I guess you could say a long time coming indeed.
Flood weather hits the tip jar tonight. Thank you. It's his first time in the tip jar. Appreciate it, and also appreciate very much that you sent me the East Pacific oscillation charts, which I'm actually going to try to bring up because I think this is this is what we really need to pay attention to when it comes to looking at all the teleconnections, and we try to look at we try to look at them. We tend to look at them more in the winter time than we do in the summertime. But the East Pacific Oscillation, as I have preached many times, is the I think it's the most important of all of the teleconnections that are out there. And Fled Weather has kindly sent me the latest East Pacific Oscillation charts for today. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because this particular these charts, the dates are very hard for me to see. And actually, it's not even letting me zoom, which is really quite inconvenient. So I'm going to try I got to look at this sideways. See. I got to get myself a magnifying glass. So, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay, I see where Sunday is. All right, so Sunday, next Sunday, the East Pacific Oscillation, which actually goes positive toward the end of this week for a really short period of time, goes from almost 2 to 3 standard deviations above the neutral line, drops down to 0, and then as we move into next week, particularly as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, it gets down to 4 standard deviations negative. That's a pretty big move. And the East Pacific Oscillation, the more negative it is, the more cold air you have spreading out over Canada and at least across the northern tier of states in the U.S. And also note that it actually stays negative beyond Thanksgiving going into the week after that. So it's signaling, and this was the GFS. Let me see if what the next one is. This is the European. And the European, Joe, for by Thanksgiving Day has, and this by the way was off the 12Z runs. The East Pacific Oscillation is almost between 3 and 4, and then the control line, which is the solid line there, gets almost 7 standard deviations negative. I mean, that's off the wall if that's the case. If that were to verify, I somehow think 7 is not going to verify, but that is a really off the wall reading for the East Pacific Oscillation.
You know, they still at the CPC, Climate Prediction Center, are still leaning on a above normal temperature pattern through the next 2 weeks, and I don't understand how they could do that after, as I said, it looks like it's going to turn much colder by the middle of not this week, but the following week, and stay cold for a while. And this seems to, what you're showing right now, Joe, seems to suggest that that will indeed be the case as we come to the latter end of November.
Yes. I'm going to attempt here to try something. Give me a moment so I can make this chart a little bit bigger. Oh, the world I live in. Hang on a second. And I'm running, you got all these things going on and all these windows open. It makes it a little bit harder. Come on. I'm trying to save it to a spot. Let's see. Let's see if I can pull this off. All right, so let's try this. And so I could at least zoom on this image a little bit. There we go. I think this might work.
Technology, Joe.
Yes, it is. There we are. So now I can zoom in and actually see the dates. All right, there you go. You can see that control line goes all the way down to -7. The mean line is between -3 and -4. So either one. I mean, even the mean line at -3 and -4. Normally, I would consider that a very strong to almost off the wall reading on the East Pacific Oscillation. And you're right. If it does stay negative, It does. I mean, as the both the GFS and the European suggest, this is going to be this may be sustained for a while.
And if you're wondering, about where winter is or where the cold weather is, again, as Joe just mentioned, if this is taken at face value, we will have a protracted spell of unseasonably cold conditions to deal with as we move toward the end of November and maybe carrying over into part of December.
When your chances for you snow lovers would be much higher. Yeah, the probabilities actually once you get past Thanksgiving, each day that goes by, your chances that you could your chances that you could see some accumulating snow, they're not high numbers by any means, but they move away from being near zero and start climbing up. Now here's the upper air on the latest GFS run, the 18Z, which I'm looking this at the upper air for the first time, but when I looked at the surface, it really didn't look that much different in the 12. But as we go through this week, now we're going to be in a bit of a flat westerly flow, kind of a ridge-ish position before the next trough moves into the east. And this is the one for Friday with the cold front, and it's a fairly sharp trough that swings around. There are a couple of short. It's not a solid phase. It looks like there's pieces here. There's a northern stream part. There are actually two northern stream shortwave parts and a southern stream. I can pop them up on the. I'll draw them in. You got one here. Looks like there's one here, and there looks like there's another one back through there, up in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So it's not a full solid phase. There is a southern stream piece to this, and you see it. I'm rolling back to Wednesday here. You got that upper low that's over southern Louisiana that just sort of becomes part of this trough, and then that lifts out. And of course, while that's happening, we've got another thing that's happening too is that we keep seeing these troughs drop down along near the longitude of Hawaii, and that's almost always a good place to look. If you're getting troughs there at around 160, which we see here next Sunday, we've got one right there. That's usually a pretty good indicator that there's going to be a trough in the east, somewhere in the east. The east is a big place, so where in the east makes a huge difference, obviously. But we do have streams of energy that are coming in to the northwest, and there's also a system down there in the south from Colorado down into Mexico. And then as this trough next weekend lifts out, another one comes and dives in. Now, this is where what the GFS was doing with that big storm that it had about 2.5 days ago was, if you notice, there's this and this. Okay, there's this trough in Michigan southward, and then there's this other thing that's up near Lake Winnipeg. Now, in those prior runs where it was making this big animal of a storm coming up the east side of the Appalachians as a deepening low, it was because the northern stream was faster and it phased with that southern trough and made a really super powerhouse trough and it would lift up to the northeast. The models have gone to where the northern stream is a little slower, so you get one trough that lifts up. This is Tuesday night, and then you get the trough with the cold air that comes in Wednesday night and Thursday. And that's where the GFS, at least, that's how it wants you to think. And as that lifts out, another upper low in Hudson Bay gains a foothold. And we also have the GFS developing a blocking high over Greenland, which is an interesting development. And that sort of pins the vortex over Hudson Bay and would suggest that we would get deliveries of cold air. This is a very cold-looking 384-hour, which is at the very end of November. No guarantee it's going to get here, obviously, but it's just very interesting that the model seems to want to go in this direction.
Well, all we could say is we'll just have to wait and see as we get closer to the end of the month. We'll see whether or not this pattern continues to show up or whether or not it suddenly flips or changes, which has happened or has been known to happen. We're just going to have to wait and see. But it would seem, at least to the two of us, Joe, that we're looking for colder conditions to move in, probably sometime not this week, but sometime the following week here in the Northeast.
Yeah. Now the European on today's run was a little different in that, excuse me. I mean, obviously it's the same for what's going on this week, and it has the same idea for the end of the week. Although it's not as deep with the trough for the end of the week, it's more confined up in Canada and sort of loses that southern stream system. Then that lifts out. Then it's got multiple troughs, one that dives into the southwest on Saturday, another one that comes into the northwest on Sunday, and a third short wave that comes in on Monday. So, excuse me. So we lift up a trough Tuesday and Wednesday, but then it drops more energy down into the west for some reason. Now, this is the thing that I don't quite get. I mean, it has the EPO signal is there because it's looking at this really overdeveloped upper ridge that it has in Alaska. Overdeveloped in the sense that it's very, very strong. I don't know that if it's going to be. It seems to also have very strong ridging up from northern Labrador toward Greenland and also from the Azores toward Greenland as well. So I'm not sure about this. This whole thing in the West to me, I don't know. It doesn't look right for some, given everything else that's going on.
You know,
Uh,
it's as you just pointed out. It's from the west. It's over the Pacific Ocean. There's very few stations that
right.
we can input data into. We'll simply have to wait until whatever it is makes its way onshore in Western North America, and then the predictability will become a little bit better, or at least the ability of being able to make out what this thing is will be a bit better.
Well, but going back to what I said earlier in the show, the model seemed to be dealing with what could be a lot of extremes, and whenever in its long range, and we know that the models love to over amplify in the long range to begin with, so that could be one of the reasons why the European is doing what it's doing. I mean, that's a very stretched out, amplified look that it has, and I don't know. I don't know that I believe that it's going to have a trough as deep as it does in the western states, and I'm not 100% convinced that you're going to have these super strong ridges that are being indicated up across Alaska, across Labrador, and then between Greenland and Iceland. So there's a lot here that needs to be worked out, and if I really caution people, and I can't emphasize this enough, especially once you get outside, go outside of 7 or 8 days, you can sort of make general ideas of out to 6 or 7 or maybe 8 days. If you want to get specific, you really need to get inside 5. But beyond that, the models are the way the models, and the equations that they use, it tends to make them want to just over amplify everything. And then when we get closer into the time frame, uh, they settle down. So it's just that's why when you look at the operational runs and you see these big storms out at day 10 and day 11 and day 12 and so on, you have to use it. Pretty much look at them with a salt mine, full of salt.
Yeah,
Um, am I right?
yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, salt mine. I think that's a lot of salt. Of course, if you're cooking, you want the coarse salt because
you
that's
can
the that's the best thing for cooking.
you can go to Zipaquirá, Colombia, which is where I went back in the late '70s. I was there, and that you talk about salt mines. The whole town is made up of salt. Might be the salt capital of the world. So
Correct. Yeah. All right. So as far as the surface goes and everything else, there's your rain in Texas that moves into Louisiana. Some heavy rains there Monday night and Tuesday. Most of that's all going to stay in the south and southeast. That barely gets to me. Meanwhile, the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, with high pressure right into Wednesday. We'll see those temperatures moderate higher. Here comes the cold front for Friday. It looks like finally the GFS has gotten away from making a tropical hurricane coming out over Cuba and going into the Bahamas. It finally has capitulated that maybe that's not going to happen, or maybe something does happen, but it's way south or way much further to the east. There is some tropical forcing going on here, and you can see all that heavy rain that's being indicated out over the Bahamas and points east. So as a result, uh, we've got a cold front coming, and then a low from that southern stream feature that's near North Carolina that runs out to about 40 and 70 and deepens, and then heads northeastward from there. So looks like we probably could get a decent amount of rain here in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England late Friday into Saturday. There's energy coming into California. You see that whipping in late next week and into next weekend. Cold shot for next weekend, but nothing that much different than what we've got now. And then the puzzle for Thanksgiving week, because we do have the GFS with another cold front on late on Tuesday that moves on through, and then a second front with the cold air that comes in later Wednesday night and for Thanksgiving Day, along with a deepening low in eastern Canada and gusty winds and sunshine. As you said, if this were to verify, Joe, you're right. Temperatures probably will not get out of the 30s. Some lake effect snows too, if this is correct, and also some snows up in Montana and back up into Idaho and into southwestern Canada. And then it's got another front and another high that comes down out of Canada later the weekend after Thanksgiving. But again, this is reflecting the GFS's rather cold look that it has on the models. So I think I'm pretty sure about what's going to happen this week. By the way, if we look at the European for Thanksgiving week, it has
I don't think it goes quite.
It doesn't go all the way. It doesn't go
Yeah.
all the way, but
Yeah.
the 12Z run, both the GFS and the European were the European actually doesn't show much rain coming in with this front at the end of the week. Just because it has a weaker trough than the GFS. High pressure behind it, but it's got this, a deep low that runs up into Minnesota that occludes, and then another low that forms down in Indiana that goes northward up into Michigan. So we've got this sort of giant arm that sweeps through on Tuesday of next week, and then it doesn't go out to Thanksgiving Day, but it sort of would suggest that it, might be calm. Then there's another front that's back over in the western lakes with the low in Kansas on Wednesday. So you got to figure that, well, that'll probably run northeast. I don't know. I think the European 12Z run was too weird with that deep trough in the west with what it did. So I'm gonna punt that away and wait to see what it does tomorrow.
Well, the European, looked like for a while it was trying to teleconnect the front coming. This is for this weekend. The front coming in from the west with that offshore. Is it a tropical system? I'm not even sure anymore. Anyway, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So
there's some tropical forcing that's part of that, but I don't think it's a tropical system.
Right.
Excuse me. Let's see. I'm just trying to bring up Mr. Briller. Mr. Briller. Let's see, did we do this? Okay, so I do not have a Briller Jeopardy. Do you?
I do.
Ooh.
I do.
Do.
And I'm going to look for it and find it. Hang on for a moment. And we will get it and bring it up. And here we are. And this week we're going to start according to Briller Jeopardy, Mr. Briller Jeopardy, Scott Briller, we're going to start the longest series in the history of Briller Jeopardy. What was the lowest temperature ever recorded in each state? The lowest temperature ever recorded in each state. So we got 5 of them today, and we'll start off with Alabama. What is the coldest temperature ever recorded in the state of Alabama, Joe?
I will say minus 19.
The fact that you even said minus, because I know a lot of people might just say, oh, well, Alabama, maybe 2 degrees or 4 degrees. The fact that you said minus is good. The fact that you went down as low as that is impressive, but not impressive enough because it's even colder.
Yeah, I know it's a big number. I couldn't know if it was. I was going to say minus 20, and then I said, all right, let me just come back one and say minus 19. So I'm obviously not low enough. So that should give hints to the chat board if they are going to be part of this.
Right. The coldest temperature ever recorded in the state of Alabama. And
Right.
Carol, the 32, we already said it's a negative number. Jason Schaefer, 13. John Melander, minus 15. Not enough. Scrubby says 5. No.
Look, hold on, stop just for a second. I said minus 19, and Joe said it wasn't low. I wasn't low enough, which means you have to go more negative than I did. All right. So Anthony says minus 27.
And Anthony is right. Minus 27 at Newmark, Alabama.
Fledweather is first runner-up at minus 28.
So now here's a doozy for you. You know who used to like to use the word doozy a lot?
Hazel.
Shirley Booth and Hazel.
Hazel.
Oh, Mr. B, that's a doozy. Alaska.
Alaska. I got to think it's got to be like a minus 60 or a minus 70, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So I'll say minus 70 just for laughs.
Just for laughs? Good try, but not cold enough.
All right, Christinapedia went to absolute zero, so that's a little bit too cold. All right, so minus 70, I'm sorry, is not cold enough?
Right.
All right, so, folks, you should be putting numbers that are more negative than minus 70. All right? So, all right, more negative than minus 70.
Joe Gaffney says minus 25. That's obviously...
They're not listening.
Fledweather. You know, Fledweather, are you actually looking these things up? Minus 80 is right on the nose at Prospect Creek Camp in Alaska.
Right, and that person who took that temperature froze in place.
Yeah. How about Arizona?
Arizona. Well, there's Flagstaff, so, it's got to be, some mountain temperature. I'm going to say...
Now, I don't know whether or not this is for Alaska or Arizona because Rich Rothmansky did hit it on the nose. No, excuse me. He hit it on the nose for Alaska, so forget about that.
I'll say for Arizona, I'll say, the northern part, I'll say minus 20.
Now, all of these that you've been giving, Joe.
Not cold enough.
Good guesses, but not cold enough.
I don't know why my camera's doing this. I'm going to switch back to my old camera tomorrow because I'm getting really tired of these zooms. I'm not that ugly. Okay, I'm just not that ugly. Okay, so I said minus 20, and once again, you're saying I'm not cold enough.
Right.
Shrubby says minus 22. Fledweather said minus 46.
Fledweather went a little bit too far.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Anthony says minus 40.
Anthony got it. That was for Hawley Lake, Arizona, minus 40 degrees.
And by the way, guys, don't cheat. All right, really. I mean, really, don't go on Google and Google it. Just take your best guess. It's more fun that way. Listen, I can cheat right now because I'm on screen, so I could go on Google while we're doing this show. I don't even do it.
Right.
All right. So if I'm not doing it, you shouldn't do it. All right. What's the next one?
How about Arkansas?
Now I know Arkansas's got a really off the wall number, and I don't remember if it's like a minus 30 something or a minus 20 something. So I'm going to say I know it's a real. I know when I first saw that years ago, but I'll say minus 28.
Wow. And I'm not sure if Christianopedia said this for Arizona or whether she meant it for Arkansas, but she did hit it right on the nose with minus 29.
Oh, and Dennis Cassia had minus
Minus,
29.
yes.
Fled
Dennis
Weather
Cat.
asked the question, how do these places get that cold? Well, you get a big Arctic air mass that comes down east of the Rockies and goes straight south. And if you look back at some winters like look back at like winters like the January of '77, for example, where a lot of those cold air masses went. I mean, straight not only straight south, but there was one that I in particular that where the center of the high went like over Florida, and it snowed in Miami that year. So you get these Arctic air masses that come down really quickly and then just go straight south or southeast where the core of the cold air, instead of going into the eastern part of the United States, goes into the south first before it comes to the east. That's usually how you see these ridiculous temperatures. And I can tell you from last December because it got down to, I mean, I know I'm in the mountains, but it got down to -9 here, and Atlanta even got down to almost to zero. So it was cold. And it was colder here than it was up in the Northeast with that brutal air mass that came southward.
The 1994 North American cold wave, and we're reaching, what is it, the 30th anniversary of that in January. One of the coldest weather spells in modern times in New York, New York City. It fell to 3 degrees above zero, but that was warm compared to Cleveland, minus 20, Cincinnati, minus 24, Sussex, New Jersey, minus 26, and Watertown, New York, minus 43 degrees. That was on January 16th, 1994. Will we ever see temperatures that cold again in those places?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but I do know
Um,
one thing. I know that the last on our list tonight is California.
that's another one. That is uh that's another one where you get these mountains. You sometimes get these Arctic air masses that come down in the west. Hmm. Now that I'm going to take I mean, I'll take a wild stab at it, and I'll just say like, -25.
Not quite. In fact, more than not quite. Colder.
It is colder. Yeah, I just don't. I didn't have a sense of how cold I should go.
Anybody on the chat board?
They'll get to it. Trying to find this auto zoom thing that everybody's telling me I need to shut off. I can't find it. Because Windows will
Okay,
hit me.
flood weather says minus 30. Jason Schaefer says minus 30. John Melander says minus 68. No, that's a little bit going overboard.
-45, Rich Rothmansky.
Well, Rich Rosmansky got it again. And this is at Boca. Boca, California, minus 45.
Yeah, see, it gets cold. It gets cold.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything else? Anything going on you want to talk about?
No, that's it.
That's
I'm
it.
done.
All
Thanks
right.
to thanks to Flood Weather and the chairman for hitting Super Chat tonight.
Okay, and of course, the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code I want a weather station, and if you do, you will get
10% off.
And Tempest is an affiliate of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So we'll see what happens tomorrow night with the next model cycle. Until then, have a great rest of your Sunday night. You've been taken out of your misery if you're a Giant fan because the game ended. And now you can go watch the Jets. Okay.
Frustration.
More torture.
Yes.
All right. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.